Great to see all of you. Thank you for coming today. I hope we have a lot of snow-free days before the winter really hits us, but I'm not really sure how long it's going to last for. We'll see. It was interesting. We went to a hot spring earlier this week, and we were spending some time with a couple from Michigan, and they were saying how usually when it snows in Michigan, the snow just stays for like 3 months. So I felt really grateful that we could get like 3 inches of snow earlier this week, and it pretty much all disappeared the next day. Something to be grateful for. So I'm going to be continuing our series on attitudes of a life of faith. And today I'm going to be talking about integrity. So first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about what is integrity. So integrity comes from the Latin word integer. And the word integer means, if you remember from math, a whole number, right? 1, 2, 3, 10 million, they're all integers. It's not a fraction or a decimal, but a whole number. And the word integrate comes from the word integer, right? The word integrate means to bring together different parts into one. And it's the opposite of the word segregate, which maybe we're more familiar with, but segregate means to divide different parts in different areas. So integrity means that we bring all of the different areas of our life into one. But the reality is that most of us don't really live that way. Most of us have our work life, then we have our family life, we have our church life, our spiritual life, we have our social life, we have our secret life, that part of us that nobody really knows about. And then also we have our sex life, right? If you're doing that. And all these areas of our life, we treat many times separately. I don't want people to know much about this area of my life or that area of my life. Or maybe in one area of my life, maybe at work, I act a certain way with those people. But with my friends, maybe I act a different way. In my family, I act a certain way. Maybe at church today here, you have a certain way of relating with other people at church. Maybe that's very different than the way that you relate with other people in your life. And I think that one of the things that we'd like to see happen in our lives, and one of the ways in which we can experience this idea of integrity in our life, is that the things that we value the most in our life, the way that we decide to live our life, that we live that way in all areas of our life, regardless of who we're around, what our circumstances are, what the expectations might be on us to act a certain way. And I think that that's a really hard thing to do in the society that we live in reality. I think that certain things are really looked upon as being desirable. For our bodies to look a certain way, to have a certain level of success, make a certain amount of money. This is kind of what we call like our image or our reputation. Sometimes that's what you see on people's social media, right? Like the image of my life that wants to be shared with the world, but not necessarily what's actually really happening in my life. But integrity implies authenticity. Integrity implies that we are real. Like the image that people see of us in this world is who we really are. What you see is what you get, right? I'm the same on the inside as I am on the outside. It's the way that we act when nobody else is looking. Then there's no one else around. It's just you and me, or just God and myself. Or it's the way that we act when we know that no one's going to notice what we did. And there's another reason why it's difficult to practice integrity in this world is that a lot of people don't practice integrity, right? We look at the world, we look at the news, what's real and what's not, right? You watch the news today and like all the things that are happening in the world and government and corporate world, and it's like, what's really actually going on? It's like you can't tell what's a facade and what's reality sometimes. It can happen with government, it can happen with churches, it can happen in your job. Maybe you work really hard in your job, but other people are taking advantage of loopholes and systems and taking breaks when they shouldn't be and stealing company property and things like that. How do you practice being a person of integrity when you're in an environment where people aren't really practicing it? People aren't really trying. Churches can get stuck up on this too, right? Churches, we can get caught up in my image. What's my image? Like, I have a reputation to uphold, And if something bad happens, it can be easier to sweep things under the rug than to stand up, take responsibility, and say, we made a mistake. This is not right. This isn't true to our values, and we're going to make it right. We're going to do something about it. And unfortunately, because a lot of people and companies and government and churches have really fallen short in the area of practicing integrity, we've lost a lot of faith and trust in these institutions. So, we have this thing like our image, the way that we want the world to see us, but I don't think that God is really particularly interested in our image. God's not really interested in our reputation. God's not really interested in those things. God is more interested in our hearts, our motivation, our integrity. And so it means that the area of our life that we feel is most important and we invest our most heart and our most energy into, that's the same energy that we should invest into all areas of our life. It means taking our values, the way that I know I believe I should live my life, and applying them not just to my work or my relationship with God, but also in my relationship with my wife or my husband, my children, my coworkers, my job, and applying them everywhere, even to strangers that we meet on the street. So I want to share a quote from the Bible. This is from Psalm 15. Lord, who may stay in your sanctuary and live on your holy mountain? So Old Testament, remember, Old Testament way of speaking, but essentially, who is close to you? Who is close to your heart? The one who walks with integrity. He speaks the truth from his heart. He refused to slander others with his tongue, won't listen to gossip, and will not cast a slur on his fellow man. Instead, he honors those who fear the Lord, and he keeps his promises even when it hurts. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this point in a few minutes. He lends his money freely without charging interest and cannot be bribed by money. Whoever does these things will never be shaken. So I've talked a little bit about what integrity is. I want to share a little bit about what is the value of practicing integrity in our life, like what are the benefits for us in a sense. And then I want to share a little bit about how we can practice integrity more through some practical steps. So, how do I benefit from having integrity? Well, first of all, integrity allows us to have peace of mind. If we lack integrity in some area in our life, maybe a promise that was never kept. I said I would do this for you and I never did it. Or a hurtful word said behind somebody's back. it's really easy to walk through life feeling really insecure. Or perhaps the image that we put out there about our life, kind of person I am, kind of family that I have, doesn't really match with the reality. And we are afraid that people are going to find out. Like if they get too close, they're going to find out what my life is really like. There's no peace of mind there. So fear. People get too close. People know my real situation. I had a situation a number of years ago where I was working for this homeschooling homestay program with Jerry, and we were out in Ohio, and we had purchased a house with a lot of land, and the hope was that we were going to turn this house into a beautiful facility with lots of land out in the middle of nowhere, and it was going to be our future home. And everything just fell through, and we ended up having to bail out of the deal and quickly clean up and try to make it seem like we didn't have 70 people living in a 4-bedroom house, which was pretty much impossible. But so I went up there with a few of the students and staff, and we were cleaning the house. And there's this, on the way back, there's a big, bump in the road, or just like a hill, ramp kind of thing. And this was always a fun thing to go over whenever we were driving back and forth to the house and to the city. It was just kind of like fun. You get over it, you go to a certain speed, and you kind of lift off your seat a little bit. It's kind of fun. It's kind of a thrill, like a roller coaster. So I was like, well, this is the last time. And I was really stupid. This was so stupid. And I just thought, I wonder what would happen if I just went a little bit faster than I have in the past. And so it just went at this ramp thing. And we actually lifted off the ground. The whole car went off the ground. And we hit the road, and the bottom of the car hit the road, and sparks flew, and it made a terrible noise. And all the neighbors came out like, what's going on? And I was like, that had never happened to me before. I had never done anything like that. And a few people were in the car like, that was great. And I'm like freaking out. I'm like, that wasn't great. Something bad happened, because I heard some noise and some sparks. But the car started, and I drove off. And later I found out that the car, it seemed like it was running fine, but maybe 4 or 5 months later it turned out it needed some work. And the car wasn't mine, though. This was the problem, okay? And I was so scared. I was so scared to admit what I did. And especially those first few months, it didn't seem like there was actually anything wrong with the car. So I thought, okay, maybe everything is okay and not a problem. But then, I remember the mom who owned the car, or originally had owned the car, kind of gave it to the program. And she got in the car one day, and she's like, man, I bet whoever damaged the car must be really scared to say something about it. And I was like, yeah, probably so. And this feeling of unease and lack of peace of mind, just, I actually was years before I admitted what happened. They knew already, actually, because other people in the car told them. I didn't know that. But one day they actually came here to visit a number of years ago, and I finally said, hey, this has really been weighing on me, and this happened, and I'm so sorry, and I'm willing to pay for the repairs that you had to pay on that car. And she was like, don't worry about it. We knew like 6-7 years ago, and we forgive you. But for me, every time I ever saw her or her husband, or ever saw their pictures on the internet or anything like that, there was a part of me that just felt that guilt and that shame and that dis-ease that there was something there that I was really out of integrity about. I had done something, I had never really taken responsibility for it. And I was glad to finally take a responsibility for it, but it really took a long time, which I feel really bad about. I wish I had taken responsibility for it at that time. So when we find ourselves in a situation where we know we've fallen short, we know we disappointed somebody, we know we're in the wrong, but we don't take responsibility for it because of fear or just not wanting to take responsibility. Maybe I don't want to pay that money. Maybe I just don't want, maybe I hope to be able to avoid being in that situation. It causes distress in us, and we can try to ignore it. We can try to act like it's not there, but it comes back and it comes up, and we aren't able to experience peace of mind in our life. So integrity gives us peace of mind. Integrity also allows for growth to happen in our life. So if any of you have come and taken my membership class, and William and Loretta and Alice and Gary, you guys know in my membership class I talk about commitment. It's actually the main point of the membership class is commitment. And I talk about commitment because people don't like commitment. People don't like to commit to things. I think I shared with you, I'll just kind of share briefly again, my experience in college. I went to community college in Wyoming, and I was in a psychology class. And the teacher there, first day, she said, "This is going to be a really hard class." I'm like, okay. I signed up for it, so I'm stuck with it, I guess. And then to my amazement, over the next 2 to 3 weeks, half the class disappeared. They went off to some other class, or they found an easier class or a different psychology teacher because they didn't want to. And then I found out later on that it's very normal, it's very common. I don't think it's a good thing, but it's very common that people find they switch classes to try to find an easier class at the beginning of school. But it's interesting in our culture, I think that the idea of committing to something is generally not really that. I mean, committing to your job, yeah, I mean, that's considered pretty admirable. But I mean, more and more and more, committing to marriage, a lifelong endeavor with one person, it's not necessarily looked at as a necessary thing anymore. But I can say, for myself that almost 15 years, Adonia and I have been together. And it's really interesting because when we were first married, what we call blessed, we took a vow. And we said, that we dedicate our marriage, of course, to one another, but to building a God-centered family and to dedicating our marriage as a couple to a higher purpose, to God, to providence, to whatever calling it was that we felt was coming to us in our life at that time. And even though there's been a lot of challenges along the way, but it's been through constantly making that effort to keep that commitment to those things that has enabled us to grow as people. It's enabled me to grow. There's been many times along the way where I felt like this is really hard. Maybe it's, is this really worth it? What's the future going to look like? But I can say honestly that but we never lost sight of that goal. We never lost sight of the commitment that we made to build a God-centered family and to live our life for God as a couple. And that doesn't mean that everything has gone the way that we've wanted it to go, and it doesn't mean that things will always go the way that we want it to go. But through challenging ourselves, when those challenges come and we feel like we could get discouraged or give up, but we remember that commitment that we made and we realize, well, there's no other option but to just go forward. Then we buckle down and we're like, what do I need to learn? What do I need to grow in order to make this happen? Because a lot of times what keeps us from being able to fulfill our commitments is ourselves, our lack of maturity, our lack of integrity. And so that's not comfortable to deal with. A lot of us don't like dealing with our own problems. I don't like dealing with it at all. I'd rather do just about anything else. But it really depends on what's on the line. What's on the line for you? What are you committed to? When the commitment is big enough, then you can overcome even yourself. So a question is, and then also we came, 5 years ago, we weren't really committed at that time, but we tried to do our best to commit. And then 2 years ago, we committed to pastoring as a lifelong mission, or whatever you want to call it. And that it's been through making that commitment and trying to live up to that commitment and that vision that has allowed us a lot of growth in our life. So, that's been my personal experience. But also, in terms of growth, we don't grow if we don't commit to something. Because if we're not committed to something, then there's no reason for growth. And there's no reason to push through the obstacles that come on that path to try to accomplish whatever you're committed to. I remember many years ago, I took a class I was in Chicago at the time, and I was doing my second year of my missions program, and they gave you the option to audit a class, because if you audit a class, then you can be more of like a student, which would allow you to make maybe some relationships, because we were doing a lot of witnessing and evangelizing, and it's like we could make some relationships and maybe make some inroads with people there. So I decided to audit a class, and I lasted about 3 weeks because I wasn't really committed to the class. I don't know if you know much about auditing classes. Auditing a class is when you kind of take the class unofficially. Like, you don't actually get a grade, and you're not actually technically on the roll, but you sit in the class, you do the homework, and then do the test if you want to, right? So after about 3 weeks, I'm like, I don't really want to do this. I'm falling asleep in class. Like, it's like, maybe I should just do something better, something else, because I'm not really committed to this. So even going to college is another good example. Like, if you commit, if you pay the money and you like, I'm going to get this degree, then it helps you to go over the times when it's like, this isn't interesting to me. Why do I have to study all this stuff I'm never going to use? Why do I have to prepare for all these things you have to do to get your degree, but you're committed, and so it allows you to go through the growth to be able to learn the things that you need to learn and whatever you got to do to get that degree. But because I wasn't committed, whatever. I could just leave it anytime, and I did. Maybe some people are not quite that way. So if you're finding yourself at a place in your life where you're not experiencing a lot of growth, then maybe ask yourself the question, what am I committed to in my life? Because in order to commit to something and follow through with it, you need integrity. Integrity is saying, I'm going to do something, and then you do it. Pretty simple, right? You say you're going to do something, and you just do it. But that, in order to fulfill our commitments, we need that. So the next thing that integrity creates is it helps us to become a person that others can depend on. We sang the song earlier, Amazing Grace, and in the song it says, the Lord has promised good to me, right? And the Bible is full of these sayings, right? God makes these promises. If you do this, I will do this. Many, 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 many times in many different places in the Bible. And God is, in my opinion, the embodiment of integrity. If God says he's going to do something, then he's going to do it. And even if we don't necessarily see how that is going to happen or how that's possible, then we just need to practice, to some degree, some faith. But we have to ask ourselves a question too, like, can God depend on me? Am I dependable? Can I say that? If I have promised something to you, then I'm going to follow through with it? A person of integrity will not change based on their circumstances or feelings, because they put their values and their commitments first before anything else, even if it costs them in the short run. So remember that verse that we read from the Bible, from Proverbs, or from Psalm? He says, and he keeps his promises even when it hurts. That's one way that you can really test the integrity of a person. Will they follow through with a commitment, even if it's at their own expense? Even if it costs them personally, but because they promised they were going to do that thing for you, or because they promised God that they were going to do that thing, they made this commitment. Even if it means that it costs them something, that they do it anyway. I think that that's really a test of integrity. Also, when we look at the Bible, it's really interesting how there are so many stories. And this is kind of one thing that I really love about the principle, is that it ties together all these stories that they just seem like individual stories at first. But then it ties it together and shows that, well, God asked Adam and Eve at the beginning to fulfill a commitment. He said, do not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and fulfill these 3 blessings. Be fruitful, multiply, and have dominion of the earth. And then when they didn't fulfill their commitment, he asked Cain and Abel to fulfill a commitment, to make an offering. Then when he didn't accept Cain's offering, he asked Cain, do not give in to your anger. Do not give in to your resentment. And every central figure in the Bible was asked to fulfill some kind of a condition of faith. Asked to do something, or asked to follow something. Whether it was Noah or Abraham or Isaac or any of these people. And then this is a story of integrity. God was asking them to make a commitment, to follow through with something. And those people had to either follow through with whatever it was God asked them to do and be blessed for it and their descendants, or they didn't follow through with it, and many times their descendants suffered, right? And God's work in providence was set back. So I think that all of us want to be somebody that others can depend on, that God can depend on, right? That's something that I think that we all want for our lives. So we need to practice this thing called integrity. Integrity allows us to be that person. I know that if my wife promises to do something for me, or promises to do something, she will do it, even if it... She said it's the laundry. I don't know why she brings that up. Well, a good example just happened yesterday, where she had sold a bottle of honey to a friend on Facebook, but they didn't get a chance to get together, and so it was like a month or 2 passed before she could give this person the glass of honey. And so there was an integrity issue there. The person had already paid for it like 2 months before, but it's still sitting on our counter. So Adonia just said, well, you know what? I'm just going to take this, throw all the kids in the car, and we're going to drive up there, and we're going to deliver it to her. Even though it was inconvenient, and is maybe not the best timing, but just like fulfilling that commitment to, get that honey to that person. Just like in a small way. So I want to just share a little bit about some things that I feel are really important that we can, in areas of our life where we can practice integrity more. How do I become a person of integrity? Keeping our promises. So many times I have experienced as a pastor people promising to do things and then not doing them. Of course, as a pastor in my life, many, we experience it everywhere, right? We experience with our coworkers. Oh yeah, I'll take your shift. Oh, did I say I was going to do that? Oh, sorry, my bad. Or offering to help somebody out, and then they never pay you back. There's all different kinds of things that can happen in our life that can feel kind of disappointing, and maybe make us feel like, why should I practice this thing, integrity, if other people in my life aren't practicing it? But it's not about other people. We all are accountable for our actions. We're all accountable for our own lives at the end of the day. But I'm not responsible for some other person keeping their end of their commitment. I'm responsible for myself to keep my commitments. If I tell God that I'm going to do something, even if it's something small, then am I a person that's going to follow through with that commitment, even if nobody else knows or cares? So keeping our promises. Here's a verse from Proverbs. People who promise things that they never give are clouds and wind that bring no rain. Very poetic. I thought that was another one. Paying your bills. Paying your bills it's a promise, right? Like, we use a service. I spent that money on my credit card. I used that gas. I used that electricity. I whatever. And paying your bills is a way of practicing integrity. And you think, oh, duh, obviously, right? But how many people do we know that actually don't pay their bills, Paying your bills is we are not allowing ourselves to be indebted, to owe for something that we've already used. So even if it costs, even if I owe somebody money, but it costs me, I have to skip lunch a day or a few days or whatever like that, then being willing to do that because I am fulfilling that promise I made and the trust that person had to lend me that money or to pay that bill. Another area that we can practice integrity, this is like relational, and like the other one was like financial integrity, this is like relational integrity, right? So relational integrity, we all know what it feels like, or maybe not all of us, but most of us know what it feels like when we find out that someone's been talking about us behind our back, or spreading rumors about you that aren't true, or that are hurtful without context. Something that sometimes it can be exciting to talk about people. This person, did you hear about this person? Did you hear about that person? Or someone maybe wants to talk to you about the bad thing that they heard, or some rumor in their life. This is really destructive. Relationally, it's very destructive, especially if maybe, for example, you shared a secret with somebody, something very, very deep and important to you. And that person shares it with other people that don't know the situation, or in a context that is hurtful or not true. Part of integrity is not allowing ourselves to get caught up in those kind of conversations. If we hear something about somebody that's concerning, then we can go talk to that person. But to spread information about other people, it's hurtful and we don't even know if it's true, is not in integrity. A gossip can't be trusted with a secret, but someone with integrity won't violate a confidence. Anyone who spreads gossip is a fool. Pretty straightforward right there. So sometimes I really like these new translations because they're just like, it's very straight in the common English language, right? This is kind of an interesting one that, I was listening to a sermon by Rick Warren. He was talking about integrity, and he was talking about this point. I was like, I never thought about that before. But doing your best at work, which is very interesting because Normally, you don't really think about that necessarily as integrity, and probably all of us, we go to work. I have worked other jobs, by the way, and we see other people who aren't necessarily working very hard. I remember one time I was working for a temp agency, and one of my job was literally just go around all day and just mop oil off the floor. It was a machine shop. They made brake parts and stuff, a lot of oil everywhere. And my job all day, every day, was just to go around and mop oil off the floor. And I got a little old, but my general attitude is like, I don't, I'm being paid, and I want to invest myself into this work. And so I really tried to invest myself into that work. But at the same time, there was other people that was like, why are you doing that? And it's like, whenever there was an opportunity to take a break, they would take a break. And if they could take a longer break and no one noticed, then they would do that. And it just kind of like not really care so much. And I think that one of the things about integrity is that when we have values, right? Like, I believe in working hard. I believe in not being indebted. I believe in putting God at the center of my life. Then we apply those things in all areas of our life, not just in my relationship with God or my relationship with my family, but also at church or in with my wife or my husband or with my job. And so it's just kind of interesting for me to reflect on this. Here's a verse from Ephesians. It says, "Don't work hard only when your master is watching," and then shirk, he means like get lazy, don't work very hard when he isn't looking. Work hard and with gladness all the time, as though working for Christ, doing the will of God with all your heart. I think that's really cool. And this is from Colossians. "Work hard and cheerfully at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than the people." Because at the end of the day, a job is a job, right? It could be working for anybody doing anything. But it's the devotion that we put into it, it's the heart and the effort that we put into it that defines who I am as a person. These are the things that God sees. This is the way I live my life, whether I'm by myself and there's nobody watching me, or even if I'm around 100 people. That's integrity. So another way that we can practice integrity is to be real with others, right? So it's not always easy to be real with people all the time. I think that none of us is able to really do it all the time. But I think that when we live our life showing one side that we think people want to see, maybe with my friends, and maybe we come to church and we show another side that we think people want to see, and go home and then, be a certain way, then it's very draining for us in our life. And it's hard for me to feel like I'm really being authentic as a person. I'm really being real. And so practicing being real with others in all situations is another way that we can practice integrity. And this is a verse from 2 Corinthians, from the Message edition. It says, "We refuse to wear masks and play games. We don't maneuver and manipulate behind the scenes. And we don't twist God's word to suit ourselves. Rather, we keep everything we do and say out in the open." So the idea of what you see is what you get. This is me. Take it or leave it. One last one I wanted to throw in there is being on time. I think that this is another way of practicing integrity. Because whether we directly made a promise or not, we have opportunity to be at a birthday party by 2 o'clock, or we have church starts at 10:30, or we have work starts at a certain time. And sometimes there are consequences if you don't get somewhere when you need to be there. And so we are much more diligent to get there. Like if we're not on time for class, then we get counted as a tardy or a late or an absent. Or if we're not on time for work, maybe our boss will get up in our face or something like that. But to be on time for the things that we are going to, that we've committed to attending, but there aren't necessarily any consequences, thank you, for, that takes integrity. And I think that's actually very important, that we practice integrity in terms of being on time for things. Many times when we're not on time, it causes somebody else to compensate for us. I know that for me, when we have church, I'm so inspired to see a lot of people in the audience, not just for my own insecurities, but also because it creates a feeling of oneness. It creates a feeling of family. We're all here. Also, it makes the music way better. Especially at the beginning, we got 15 people in the pews singing. It sounds all right. But you got like 50 people in the pews, and it's just that much better of an experience for everybody. Your being here allows for everyone's experience to be better. Think of it that way. Now, I look forward to the day when we're just like busting at the seams and we don't have, if you're late, like you don't get a seat. That'll be a really cool, but right now we don't have that kind of a situation, but someday we're going to be there. But practicing the integrity in this area actually brings a lot of life and fullness to our church experience. And I would love to ask all of you to please take that to heart. And of course, not just in church, we're talking about other things as well, right? Maybe you have somebody in your life that's regularly late for things. How does that feel for you? Especially if you're a person that always tries to be on time for things. So this is a way that we can practice integrity. These are different areas, and there's more areas that I didn't cover, but these are just some things, food for thought, things that for us to chew over. Look at areas in my life, maybe I can practice more integrity in this area. Maybe I can practice more integrity in this area. Maybe if I practice more integrity in these areas of my life, it'll bring me more peace of mind. It'll make me more of a dependable person, more of a person that God can count on. What was the other one? Oh, and we grow. We experience growth in our life. That's a big one. That's really important. When we don't experience growth in our life, then our life is just day to day. Who wants that? I don't think any of us do, but we find ourselves in that sometimes. Please think, what are you committed to? Lastly, I want to share a excerpt from the Divine Principle. God's predestination of his will, that the purpose of creation one day be fulfilled, must also be absolute. As it is written, I have spoken and I will bring it to pass. I have purposed and I will do it. From Isaiah 46. So God is a God of integrity. He says he's going to do something and he's going to do it. Doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. This is from the Bible, right? So it's thousands of years old, and so this actual process of fulfilling that promise takes a long time. But the point is that God isn't going to change. He's not going to just one day be like, well, actually, I changed my mind. Circumstances have changed. I got a little tired. I didn't get a good rest last night, but that's the way we are. But God isn't that way. So becoming more of a God-centered person, practicing faith in our day-to-day life involves becoming a person of integrity, because God is a being of integrity. We practice integrity in our life, or we look for the areas in which we're out of integrity, then we just can't help it. I believe we become closer in resonance with God. God's character, God's love, God's mindset about his intentions and for us. So, having integrity doesn't mean that we're perfect. It doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean that we don't fall short in any of these or all of these categories. I look at all these categories and I think, man, I've fallen short in all of them at different times. We all make mistakes, and I find myself many times not getting back to people and not fulfilling things in a timely manner that I promised to do. And sometimes and my wife can tell you, and many of you have experienced, but, fall short in all of these areas. But I think that what God is looking for is God is looking for the intention. God is looking for our hearts. God is looking for our motivations. And I think that if God sees that we're trying and it's something important to us, God wants to support us. God wants to help us. God wants to bless us. So I think that's kind of the most important thing. And it's not a bad thing to look at all these things that I put up there and to recognize, man, I'm not in integrity in some areas of my life. Maybe I haven't been very truthful about certain parts of my life that I want to keep hidden from everybody, from people, even my loved ones. But these things eventually, they eat away at us. They destroy our lives. So practicing integrity, if we take it to heart, helps allow us to round our lives and live our lives more fully and successfully. So that's my sermon. Please join me in prayer. Good morning, our most beloved Heavenly Parent. Thank you for this day. So grateful for every single person who could be here this morning to share in this time together. Grateful that we could sing songs of gratitude and amazing grace. We have so much to be grateful for. We have received so much grace in our lives, even though it doesn't mean we don't go through challenges, but we thank you for those things. I pray, Heavenly Parent, that we can grow to become people of integrity in our lives, that we can grow to become more like you, that we can look at the areas in which in our life that we may be hurting ourselves, that we may be hurting others, that we may be limiting ourselves because we are not practicing integrity in our lives. Heavenly Parent, I pray that we, through practicing these things, that we can create healing. This world is desperately in need of more people of integrity, more businesses of integrity, more churches of integrity. That many times when we look at this world, it's easier to think that, why should I even bother? But I believe that, Heavenly Parent, when you see your children trying so hard, even if no one else is looking and no one else cares, but because they know that that's the right thing to do, and because they're trying to become closer to you, they're trying to become more like you, that will inspire you, that will bring you joy, and will draw you to be closer to us, Heavenly Parent. We pray that we can create a community like that we can create families like that we can build a world that more closely embodies these values and virtues, Heavenly Parent. And I thank you, and I offer this prayer in the name of Michael and Adonia Hantrick, a blessed Central family. Amen and Aju. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Mike. It just reminded me of a story from this week. I think it was on Friday. I went up to Mike and I was like, I'm a little sad. He was like, why? I was like, well, the last few weeks after church, when you've given a sermon, you put your recording up on YouTube like the next day, and you put mine up like the next Saturday. So what's up with that? And he's like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm so sorry. And I'll put it up right away. And, sometimes we are out of integrity without even being aware of it. It's not in our blind spot. But when he said that and he did it, then I felt, it's not because he doesn't care about my sermons. It's not because he doesn't love me, I felt everything was okay. It was taken care of. So I think even though we fall short, it's really important to acknowledge to God and to people that we make some mistakes sometimes. And if we make effort to make restitution or restore that, then our integrity can become whole again. So thank you so much for the great message. Pastor Mike is really, what you see is what you get with him. It's something I've noticed from the very beginning when we first got married and first got blessed. I was like, he is a completely honest person. I never have to doubt his intentions. I never have to doubt his motivations. He is, for good or bad, that is exactly who he is, and I really appreciate that. Okay, we're going to have our offering. So if you haven't yet had a chance to put your tithes or donations in the basket, our wonderful welcome ministry will be bringing it up to the front while we play some reflection and meditation music. So take this time to reflect and give your donation if you like, and then we'll finish up.